Welcome back. It was a legal fight that lasted 5 years, but today the Supreme Court of Canada brought it to an end. The court ruled that Canada's pot laws are constitutional. It's a big disappointment for marijuana activists and the defendants in the 3 cases. John Conroy is a lawyer for one of them. He joins us from Vancouver. Mr. Conroy, what do you make of all this? Were you surprised by today's decision?
No, I wouldn't say I was surprised, certainly disappointed, hoping that they would accept the arguments of the appellants, and unfortunately they didn't. We've always known, of course, that the court could rule against us and could basically say what they appear to have. It's a lengthy judgment. I haven't had a chance to go over it thoroughly, but they appear to be basically saying that it's a matter of legislative public policy, that it's a matter for Parliament.
Well, in not being surprised, what made you think it would turn out this way?
Well, I knew that they might defer to Parliament. That was one of the obstacles that we had to overcome in our arguments, was to try and convince the court that the harm principle was a principle of fundamental justice, and that Parliament, that there were limits on the criminal law power. Unfortunately, they didn't accede to my arguments or the arguments of other counsel, and they've said it's up to Parliament. So marijuana smokers and users and growers and dealers have to go to their politicians now and lobby their politicians in order to change the law, in order to make sure that it's not simply some traffic ticket scheme for marijuana smokers where there's nothing for alcohol and tobacco users.
And in the meantime, though, Mr. Conroy, I mean, legally, what does this mean for recreational pot users?
It means that the law remains as it did yesterday, and so people will continue to be charged with marijuana offenses, simple possession, possession for the purpose of trafficking, growing, and so on. The law is as it always has been for many, many years in Canada.
And how do you think, now that the ball is in their court, the Canadian Parliament is going to tackle this issue? What do you expect to see happen?
Well, I don't expect a lot, unfortunately, from our politicians, given historically what they've done. They've always come up to the brink, and then they've been always said they're too busy or they've got other more important things to deal with. We know there's Bill C-38 out there. Some people are in favor of it because it certainly heads in the right direction as far as simple possession is concerned. My fear, though, is that if they introduce it and if we have a traffic ticket type scheme, that the number of charges will go up. Young people in particular will be hassled by the police. It's easier to write traffic tickets or tickets than it is to proceed through criminal charges.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at here is, what impact do you think today's decision is likely to have on people like Prime Minister Martin when it comes to crafting legislation?
Well, I'm not sure it'll have much impact on them at all. They'll simply be able to say, well, the courts have spoken and have said that it's up to us, so we've got the power to decide what to do. We're not under any threat of a court striking it down. Parliament will look at the judgment and craft legislation that's consistent with the judgment. From what I've read so far, there aren't too many impediments in the judgment. The court does say that imprisonment for simple possession would be disproportionate. That's certainly what in practice has been happening in British Columbia. People don't go to prison for simple possession.
What about today's ruling as far as medical users of marijuana go?
Well, I don't think it impacts on the medical. Those cases will continue to wend their way up to the court, and we'll see what they have to say in Hitzig and so on. Had they essentially said that simple possession was legal, of course, that would have solved the entire medical marijuana issue. A person would no longer have to go to a doctor or to a specialist in order to get approval in order to use it. Unfortunately, they have maintained the prohibition on simple possession, and so medical users at the moment will continue to have to go through a more rigorous regime in order to use marijuana compared to any other drug.
Mr. Conroy, we have to leave it at that for today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.